Okay, so we've had a few weeks now to try to process the utter insanity of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. And it's not been easy going, to say the least. I mean, there's just way too much in that movie. Also, everyone who dislikes the film seems to have completely different grievances. It isn't like The Last Jedi discourse, where folks drew ideological battle lines and all repeated the same talking points. But that's just how crazy this movie is. There are major parts of The Rise of Skywalker that I swear we're all gonna forget happened, just because folks are gonna lose interest before we run out of things to argue about. The film actually still does enough to wrap up the new trilogy, but it becomes evident that its overarching narrative isn't clearly outlined, and it shows. So here's a list of 10 such inconsistencies and continuity errors. Number 10. What happened to Leia's clothes? Yeah, exactly. What happened to her clothes? And where are they? In the film, we saw Leia holding on to death in order to turn her son back to the light, and when she finally dies, strangely, the sheet on her bed falls completely flat, as if her clothes disappeared with her. However, this clearly doesn't fit the continuity of previous Star Wars films, because we've seen both Yoda and Obi-Wan disappear into piles of their own clothes. Number 9. What's this crazy new healing power? Okay, so first let me make this clear. The crazy new power Rey has access to isn't exactly an error in continuity, but it does make the previous films make a lot less sense. All wounds are trivial now because Force users can easily heal them. If they're too late and a person died, they can just bring them back from the dead. Rey's just a god now, the most powerful being who ever lived. But the question remains, if this was a power that Jedi could harness, why'd we never seen it before in a Star Wars film? Number 8. C-3PO should be able to overwrite his programming. If Return of the Jedi is anything to go by, then C-3PO actually is able to overcome his own programming if he needs to. Although that's definitely not the case in The Rise of Skywalker. One of the main missions the main cast undertakes is to take a look inside C-3PO's memory in order to discover the route to Exegol. Unfortunately, his programming forbids him from it. Who did this? Doesn't matter, it just is. This forces them to reboot C-3PO to override his programming, which will erase his memory and effectively kill him as he's been known. It sounds sad, but 3PO even gets an emotional farewell out of it. But at the end, 3PO gets his memories restored thanks to a backup on R2-D2's hard drive. Number 7. We never found out how Maz got Luke's lightsaber. As we saw in Episode 7, director J.J. Abrams allowed the newly introduced Maz Kanata to be the one who had possession of Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. When asked why she had it, all she had to say was, "A good question for another time." Most of us assumed that maybe Abrams set this up just to see how a future director could explain it. But when he was unexpectedly handed the final film, he realized he had no answer. The irony about this is that his own question from Episode 7 ended up creating a continuity error that leaves the origin of Luke's lightsaber an unexplainable mystery by the end of the Skywalker saga. Number 6. Final scene doesn't match up. Most of us would have expected that the ending of the biggest series of all time would be a carefully crafted piece of cinematography that avoids all mistakes possible. But thinking about it now, maybe we were expecting a bit too much after all. I mean, not much was done to keep Rey's expression and hair consistent between shots, simply because it changes about 5 times during the roughly 1 minute long scene. Number 5. They didn't need to crash land the Falcon. We've seen many times that the Millennium Falcon is a powerful ship and is capable of a lot of cool stuff. One of these things is its ability to land and take off vertically before speeding off into the distance. However, they didn't seem to remember that in The Rise of Skywalker, because when the Falcon was landing on Kef Bir, they ended up ramming the ship into a hill sideways due to an ineffective landing gear, when all they needed to do was slow up and bring it down vertically like it's been done many times before. Talk about bad piloting. Number 4. Why does Luke's ship work? Yeah, so this had me thinking too for a while now. I mean, when Luke raised his ship from the water for Rey to use, there were a couple of problems about it. Firstly, the ship was slightly different from the one shown in the flashback in The Last Jedi. Secondly, what's more of an issue is that this flashback actually showed Luke destroying the ship and it was broken, with its door being used as an entrance to his hut, and then left underwater for many years. But strangely, somehow this damage is all reversed in The Rise of Skywalker, and Rey flies off without a hitch. Number 3. There are a few characters we shouldn't have heard. It's without any doubt that the lore of Star Wars canon is certainly our most reliable source in determining how and what the Force can do. It's clarified that a Jedi has to learn how to become one with the Force, and it simply doesn't just happen. Which is why Ben Solo is unable to do it at the end of the film, and why Mace Windu shouldn't be able to be heard when Rey hears the voices of the Jedi. Furthermore, characters from the Star Wars canon who exist outside the film series all died without learning the ability, so they shouldn't be able to be heard either. Number 2. Wexley's ship change. We don't know if you all noticed it, but yes, oddly, Wexley's ship changed. We have to admit that Temmin Snap Wexley was one of the great underappreciated characters of the sequel trilogy, which is why his death hit so hard in the final battle, the Battle of Exegol. Unfortunately, the ship he was in doesn't really add up to what we'd seen before. When the crew was seen boarding their ships, he was getting into an A-wing fighter. But strangely enough, the ship he was in when Poe watched him get blown up was clearly an X-wing. Number 1. Somehow Palpatine has returned. There's a lot of creative decisions on this movie that I can't even begin to understand. And the most confusing of those decisions is to have Emperor Palpatine make his big return to the galactic stage between movies. Star Wars purists might even claim that the return of Emperor Palpatine is a continuity error in itself. It clearly undermines the sacrifice of Darth Vader and turns the powerful ending of Return of the Jedi on its head. Whatever your opinion on it may be, it's clear that the explanation of his return makes zero sense. The biggest, most powerful villain the galaxy has ever seen returns from death with more power than ever, and it's explained with, somehow Palpatine has returned. If you're gonna cram a whole trilogy of stories into one movie, you still have to start at the beginning. So that was the last one. Regardless of all the continuity errors, I think the film did a great, if slightly messy, job at capturing the spirit of Star Wars. A lot of critics complained about too much fan service, but I love the fan service. Hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you subscribe and hit that like button if you want to see more videos like this in the future.